everything is better when we are side by side. Hey, side by side, side by side, side by side. Hey, side by side, when we are side by side.
Hey E.
Hey T, how are you, girl?
I'm okay. Experienced some grief in my family this week, so processing that, and I think it's easy for me to wanted to say I'm good, but that wouldn't be real. And so I'm okay. I'm just okay today. How are you?
Yeah, I'm grateful that you're always authentic and honest about how you're really doing, because one, that's what we're all about in communion, and two, it has a lot to do with what we're talking about today. But yes, I am actually doing okay, and I would say okay because a couple weeks ago, or the last couple weeks, it's been a up and down rat race for me emotionally. How I've been feeling, I feel like everything is out of control. Like literally the week that we released the out of control episode, everything went out of control, and I needed to hear the own words that were coming from my mouth and from your mouth during that week. I've submitted control, or maybe I'm just tired of fighting for control, and I'm sitting back and getting myself out of the driver's seat and trying to figure out, okay, Lord, what are you doing, and what do I need to submit to versus try to fight? So anyway, yeah, we're sisters. We're coming in this real and authentic as usual. And yeah, I'm grateful for that.
Sometimes life is a blur. Right?
Yep.
And you're just like, at any point, does it just stop and get easy? And
Right.
I guess the answer is no. But today we're here following the episode of your dear friend and my new friend, Jana, who so vulnerably shared about her journey and her story. And even more specifically, about her living a life where she's felt invisible, which, whoa, that's so heavy to feel as if you can go through the world not being seen or noticed or known or valued or heard. And so for her to share that was incredible. And I definitely resonated with so many parts of her story, especially when it comes to race. And we talked a bit about it, but that searching for belonging. And I truly believe there are so many people in this world that are searching for belonging, and the way it manifests might look different. In her case, she talked about this assimilation or comparing herself, or even sometimes mending and molding to fit in, if you will, in an effort to belong. But it can look so many different ways, whether it's isolation or questioning ourselves. And it can lead to some really, really dark places when you are searching for a place of belonging. And not to get too nerdy about it, because I am a nerd and I do love some good psychology, but that's a really basic human need. When you think about Maslow's hierarchy of human needs, belonging is a significant one on there. And I do believe we are created to find places of belonging. And so hearing her story, I could definitely see parts of my own story in hers. And quite frankly, it's a lot of the reason why I said yes to the invitation to go on this journey to start communion with you, because I really wanted to create something I've longed for my whole life. If you know me, you know I am all about creating tables. I'm all about creating community. Like, that is my heart's mission. But I think it is because the way that my need for belonging has manifested in my life is in me trying to create for others the very thing I need. As Jana talked about as well, her feeling invisible, and now her life's work being all about making other people feel visible. And so I just thought it was a beautiful story around belonging and her finding her place in the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Jana has this incredible way of just being honest and being authentic. And I've known her for a good amount of time now. And I have watched that evolution of her going from this place of feeling like she needed to stay hidden or stay unseen because of what she talked about in her culture by and large, but also just her experience in the broader culture as an Asian American. And I've yet watched her not only embrace her culture, but really embrace who she is. Brene Brown, who you and I both love, does all this work on shame, on vulnerability, on authenticity. And she did a lot of work and a lot of studying on the topic of belonging. And I love what she says about belonging, because she talks about how we look for belonging, like you said, that the basic human need. But she spent a lot of time looking at where we get belonging wrong. And she talks about the difference between fitting in and belonging. And she defines fitting in as when you're longing to be a part of something else. But belonging is when you're actually wanted. And so often we don't believe that we're wanted, so we spend our life trying to fit in. I could go off on that, but that concept alone is so intriguing. It's interesting. It's striking to me, because I can think of a lot of areas of my life where I've longed to belong, but instead I've settled to fit in.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. If you are following us on social, you've probably seen the reel that we posted last week where I talk about a trapezoid, which, by the way, guys, I could not think of the name of that shape for the life of me. I had to Google it. I was like, wait, what's that shape that's not a rectangle but not a triangle? It's called a trapezoid, guys. It's called a trapezoid.
You were describing it, and I was just looking at you like, I don't know the name of that.
Right. Like, I had to draw it and everything. It might be a little out there, guys. So this is how my brain works. But yeah, I was thinking about a trapezoid. And I was like, okay, this is such a great visual example of how I've spent most of my life. Because like Jana, I have a complicated racial history. I'm mixed. And I've talked about this before on our episodes, but being mixed means sometimes it's complicated paths that oppose one another. In order to fit in one place, you got to kind of deny the other part of you. And it's not just my racial identity, right? Like, I also lived in a world of dichotomy. I used to say if I was going to write a book, it would be called Stuck at the Intersection, because I come from two different paths. They meet at this intersection and I'm just like, wait, which lane do I travel? And so for me, it could manifest, and I've talked about this, being the girl from the hood that goes to private school, or all the things. And so there's been so many areas of my life where I felt like I'm not one thing or the other, but I'm multiple things. I'm multidimensional. I can maybe fit in here and here, but not really fit in either place. And so when I thought about a trapezoid, I was like, that's it. I'm a trapezoid. I'm not quite a rectangle, and I'm not quite a triangle. So I can't hang with the triangles fully without getting realized. And I can't hang with the rectangles without being found out that I'm not fully a rectangle. And so then where do I fit in? And that is like the reality of life. For example, if I'm a trapezoid, I could try to go kick it with the triangles. But the only way I could really mask me being a triangle is if I put a little hat on, a little triangle at the top to give it a little pointy point so that I could be a triangle. But I'm not quite a triangle. And you'll know that I'm putting something on to try and make me feel like I can blend in.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's just not ever going to be the case. And I had to find some peace about the fact I am not a triangle. I am not a rectangle, but I am a trapezoid. And there's other trapezoids out there. So where they at, though? And when I heard her story, like I said, y'all know my brain's a little crazy sometimes. But when I heard her
all you trapezoids out there, make sure you DM TT. She's looking for fellow trapezoids.
Yes, where my trapezoids at?
I love you.
I told y'all, like, sometimes the way my brain works. But hey, there's trapezoids out there. And so rather than trying to be a triangle or be a rectangle, I'm just like, hey, I would kick it with the rectangles. Just know I'm kind of like you, like a long distant cousin, but I'm not quite you. Same with the triangles. But my trapezoids, hey, we create a lane of our own. And so I think it's dope when we finally get to that realization that we don't have to be one or the other, but we can be multidimensional, or we can be both, or we can be something completely separate. And that there's others out there that are looking for people that share that same experience and are looking for a community as well, where they're understood, fully seen, can fully come as their full self, not masking and not trying to fit in anywhere, but they can just be. So,
no, I love that analogy, T. I think you nailed it. And your brain thinks in shapes, and my brain thinks differently, but that's what I love about you, and that's what I love about our friendship is we have all these random analogies and they work. They just work. But honestly, what you were saying about that makes me think about social media, because I think social media is one place in our life where we all kind of feel like a trapezoid. We all kind of feel like we don't fit in. And so we alter who we are on social media to try to fit in. I think of the times in my life, and you and I have talked about this and related in this way, where we'll post a picture of us and our kids and we're all smiling and it looks like we're having a great time. But what people don't know is about 5 seconds before or 5 seconds after, there's a meltdown. We're screaming at our kid or whatever, and it is just not reality. And I think so much of the persona that we reflect about ourselves on social media is really evidence of our lack of feeling like we would really be ever accepted or wanted. If we're having a moment of empathy and relating to each other and to this community, I think it's not a matter of people not wanting to be known, because I really do believe that the human heart wants to be known. I think that we were created to be known. I think that we can easily run the risk of not wanting to be known when we have tried to be known by people before. We've tried to invite people into our life. We've tried to actually believe that people want us, and it's returned void. We've been hurt by other people. We've shared who we are with other people and then feel rejected in return. And so then it turns us into hiding, where it turns us into, never mind, I'm not going to let anybody know me because I tried to put myself out there. I tried to invite you into community. I tried to allow you to really know me. And what it was met with was you turned your back on me or you rejected me. And so all of a sudden we go from really desiring to be known to hiding or to keeping ourselves shielded because we don't want to go through that pain again.
Yeah. And I love that you talked about social media specifically, because even as we've started Come.Union, and maybe if you've been following, but I have a complicated relationship with social media. I don't really enjoy it because sometimes it feels like we try to portray this lifestyle that is not 100% accurate. But how can you capture reality in one photo when we have 24 hours in a day? And that's just one small snapshot. I specifically remember this one instance where I posted this cute little photo of her. She was in this little Doña Florita dress. It was the start of Hispanic Heritage Month. I had Suavemente on, and she's doing her little 1-2 step, merengue, whatever. And I was like, oh, happy Hispanic Heritage Month. Literally pressed post on that. And Storm barfed all over my kitchen floor. And I spent the next 30 minutes cleaning up all that barf, right? So some people was like, oh, look at her cute little family. Look at her cute little daughter. She's dressed so cute. Oh, they're celebrating. Blah, blah. And it's like, no, you don't even know what the rest of that day looked like. And so where I struggle specifically with social media is it's a place where we go to fit in, but where we don't go to be known or vulnerable all the time. The fact that people on our social media are called our friends, do we really know all those people? Do they really deserve to be called friend? Because my friends are the ones who I text in a group text like, y'all won't believe what just happened. And I send them a picture of Storm barfing all over the floor. My social media, I didn't do that. I'm not going to put my daughter out there for everybody to see, especially people that don't know us like that. And so that social media world just, it exacerbates this feeling of, can I be vulnerable? Can I show me fully? Can the world handle it sometimes, I think is the question. And to your point, for me, you are absolutely right. That apathy kicked in for me. It made
Wow.
me be like, you know what? Rather than post a little bit here or engage a little bit there, I don't want to be seen at all. I don't want to post at all. I don't want anybody to know any parts of my life because I don't feel safe all the time. Or I feel like it's judged or it's vanity metrics in terms of how many people like it. And it's like that need for that response, that stimulus to say, oh, somebody liked this. And sometimes I found myself, this is real, going to the likes to see who didn't like it and
Oh, yeah.
focusing on the people who didn't like it. And so it shifts our perspective. Rather than acknowledging all the positive comments, it can put us in a place where we're like, you know what? I'm so focused on who didn't like it that we can start deconstructing ourselves. We can start picking ourselves apart. And then, yes, we do become apathetic and we start to tell ourselves these lies. And the next thing you know, we don't want to be seen. We don't
Yeah.
want to engage. And it's easier to go in hiding. It's easier to isolate. It's easier for us to tell ourselves this message that we are not enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there's a big difference between not being seen and not wanting to be seen. And I think when we long to be seen, that's what God gave us the desire for, because he sees us and he wants us to feel known. He wants us to feel like we have a place of belonging. But like you just said, when you have social media or broken relationships or times where people in our life have really hurt us when we've allowed them in, now we switch into that section of not wanting to be vulnerable anymore, not wanting to really allow people to see these parts of us, because we start to believe that those things are bad or that there's some deficiency in us, and we forget who God says we are. We forgot who God created us to be, and instead of getting to live in that freedom, we go to this place of withdrawal. But I actually think that's biblical too. When we look at the Bible and we look at lots of different people all throughout scripture, there was also a difference between the ones who weren't seen and by society and then the people who didn't want to be seen because they were hurt. And I think of people like David, who had all of this bad stuff that he had done. Like, surely society and the world would say, like, David, you're trash. And yet God saw something different in David. And even in the moment of David not wanting to be seen because he doesn't feel worthy, God makes him a king. And then all of a sudden that vulnerability comes out. The whole book of Psalms is David's journal entries, I like to say. It's him crying out to God in lament. It's him praising God for how he's brought him from one place to another. I think of Moses, when Moses like, hey, God, go find someone else. Let it not be me. And yet God said, no, Moses, I want you. I'm choosing you. I want you to be the one who goes and leads people into the promised land. I think of Paul, who persecuted Christians, who literally didn't want to be seen. And then, kind of like a interesting caveat, God takes away his sight. And now all of a sudden he sees for the first time who God really is. And he sees his identity for the very first time. And then he goes out to change the world around him. And it can go on and on and on. We talked last episode or a couple episodes again about Peter. Peter probably didn't want to be seen in that moment when he betrayed Jesus. And yet Jesus speaks right to his heart and says, no, I see you. I still want you. I still love you. You still belong with me. Oh, and I want you to go out and make disciples throughout all the earth and baptize them in my name. And he changed the world forever. And so I think about how much the enemy doesn't want us to freaking be seen, how he wants us to live in places of isolation. He wants us to live invisible. Even the culture thing that we talked about with Jana, I think that's a freaking attack of the enemy too. I think that cultural thing that she has had to experience in her life was the enemy's way of speaking into an Asian culture, saying, stay invisible, specifically to those women, stay invisible, stay unseen. I mean, it's not just in spiritual places, it's in our day-to-day life of causing us to go into places of not being seen.
Yes, I agree. It's definitely spiritual for sure, E. What we have to realize is that God loves us despite. I think about all the people in the Bible you gave all of those accounts of people who did magnificent things and were called by God and were on assignment and who we see in the hall of faith in Hebrews 11. What about some of the characters that didn't even have names in the Bible and were written off by society? The woman at the well, the woman hemorrhaging, the men with leprosy. I mean, you could go on and on and on. And though they were outcast by society, maybe even some of them didn't want to be seen because being seen by society was just too painful. And yet God's love for them, he still noticed them. He still noticed them. Like, how amazing is it that even when we feel unworthy, or when we've accepted the message that we aren't enough, or we've accepted the message that we're too broken, or we've accepted the message that we're not wanted, God still pursues us. God still loves us. God still wants us. Man.
That's a great example, because I'm thinking about those people. I'm thinking about the woman at the well. I'm thinking of the hemorrhaging woman or the lepers. And I'm thinking of their vulnerability. They're approaching Jesus in their worst state, bottom of the barrel state. And not one time does Jesus encounter one of those people and not meet them with empathy, compassion, and speaking identity into them. Vulnerability leads to identity. When we're able to be vulnerable, when we're able to share ourselves, I can speak from my own personal experience. That's the freest I've ever felt, when it's met with a person who says, I see you, I love you. That's not what defines you. That's not who you are. And that's literally what Jesus does to each of those people in Scripture. We'll always talk about this, and y'all, I hope you don't get tired of it. The gospel for me, in one succinct passage and story of Scripture, is the prodigal son. And I think it's the great example of us believing that when we're at our worst, God would want to turn his back on us. It's the rebuttal to that lie. It's the way that God shows us that isn't his heart. Because I know there's a lot of people walking this earth who walked away from faith, and maybe that's you who's listening. Like, you've said, I like your Christ, but I don't like your Christians because your Christians are so unlike your Christ. And I understand that. I understand that because you've walked away. But what we believe is we start projecting how other people have treated us on the very character and nature of who God is. And if you read the story, the father doesn't sit on the porch and say, you really effed up, dude. You better go figure it out. I don't want to see you right now. Yeah, you're right. You're not worthy of my love. The father's freaking running towards the son. He is running towards his son. He doesn't even let his son do his rehearsed speech. He just says, I love you. I'm glad you're home. Let's party. And that love is what changed everything for the son. And I believe from that day forward, that son was free. That son was free to live exactly who God says that son was. But that son left. He left a place of total belonging. Oh, this is a word. The son leaves a place of total belonging where he was actually wanted to go and try to fit in. He leaves a place of total safety and goes off and tries to fit in and tries to find life where it will never be found. And what happens? He comes back to the place where he was actually wanted, and he comes alive.
That's good, E. That's good. But isn't that exactly what the gospel is? God sent his son, Jesus. We going all over the Bible today, y'all. So we going heavy on the Bible today. So embrace yourself. But God sent his son to reconcile our relationship with God, because God so deeply sought relationship with us, intimacy with us, to know us, to love us, to let us know how much he loved us, only for us to reject his son and hang him on a cross. And when I think about that, that's mind-blowing. We spend so much time trying to fit in this world, trying to belong in this world. And God sent his son, and his son didn't even belong in this world. His son was rejected by this world. Jesus perfectly walked the earth and yet still was rejected. He was out here healing people, doing miracles, walking in love and truth. He came to save the world. And yet still, they said, nah, we cool, Jesus. Like,
Yeah.
we're going to reject you. Go ahead, play out. Nah, you don't belong here. You don't belong here. Literally, the very thing, the sign that was hung above his head while he was on the cross was about questioning his identity. Ooh.
Right.
It was literally telling him he didn't belong here. Who he said he was, or who he was showing them he was not truth, was not real, was blasphemy. His whole identity is the very thing that nailed him to the cross. And we expect that we're going to just walk through this earth and everybody's going to applaud us and like us. And that's fake love.
Yeah.
I'm calling it fake love. So I serve in the youth ministry at my church, and a couple of the ladies that I do youth ministry with were like, every week we try to pick a devotional on the Bible app and do it together and discuss it, and keeps us accountable. And so this week we were going through Esther, and I've heard the story of Esther, but I don't know that I've dove into it this deeply. And maybe in the season of life I'm in, living word, it's resonating with me differently. But I was reading in Esther too. And, the story of Esther is about this girl who's raised by her uncle. So she's an orphan. She's of Jewish background. But at the time, you have King Xerxes, who's Persian, that's ruling. Basically, he gets drunk, having a party, all this other stuff, calls for his queen, Vashti. She doesn't want to come. He gets in his feelings. His council tells him, well, do away with her. He then decides to send for all the virgins, all the pretty virgins, find a new queen. And Esther, this young girl, gets called, and she goes through 12 months of beauty treatment, all this other stuff. I'm giving you a background because I know I'm learning about this, and we could mention stuff in the Bible all day. You're like, I don't know what they talking about. So hopefully this is a Cliff Note version. The TLT. But anyway. So then we get to Esther 2. And at this point, we hear that she's gone through 12 months of beauty treatments and all of these things that all of these girls have to prepare for the king. And Esther's about to meet with the king and be presented to the king. And they ask her, do you want to take anything extra so you can wow him and woo him? And she's like, no, I'm good. I'm just going to go. So she goes. And in this devotional, what I thought was so incredible was he ends up picking Esther to be his queen. But what it talked about, when it talked about the character of Esther, what this devotional essentially said was she went knowing who she was, knowing her value. She walked before him. She didn't bring anything extra to try to make her stand out. She didn't perform or act. She didn't try to do anything that was beyond who she was created to be to earn favor with the king. And he selects her. He does. But the devotional said, even if he hadn't, Esther still knew her value. She still knew that she was a daughter of a true king, God. And that got me thinking a lot, because I was like, well, first of all, if I was doing all of that and I had to go through all these treatments and I knew, I was like, oh, wait, I'm in this little beauty pageant, if you will. And I knew I was up against other people. I'm a little competitive. I would have felt some type of way if he didn't pick me after I did all of that stuff. And she went in like, no, I don't have anything to prove. He either wants me or he doesn't. And if he doesn't, I'm cool. Yeah. And he does choose her. The craziest part about this whole story is, of all the women, I don't know much background about the other women, Esther technically didn't belong. She was Jewish. Her whole existence could have compromised him choosing her and who she was. And she still walked in knowing who she was, knowing her background, knowing the risk, not performing or doing anything extra to earn his favor. She just walked in knowing who she was. Yep. And it made me ask myself the question of, if I operated like that, how would I move differently? Yeah. If I knew I was enough just as I was created. We got to learn who we are, period.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when we know who we are, we get to walk in confidence because of that. Like, when I know who I am, then that's when I believe I belong. When I believe that who God says I am is enough, then I get to walk in confidence, and it's true confidence. I know I talk about Brene Brown, but there's another quote from one of her books, says, because true belonging only really happens when we present our authentic and perfect self to the world, and then our sense of belonging can never be greater because we have self-acceptance. And that's the truth. Like, when I accept who I am and I believe in who God says I am, now we're always changing, we're evolving, we're maturing, we're growing. My kids, I hope that who they are right now at 6 years old is not all of the things, like still pooping in their pants when they're 30, but maturity wise and who they are, I believe I want them at their core to always be that. If I could harness anything in my boys, it's like, man, Jude, I hope that you are always empathetic and compassionate, because he is one of the most empathetic and compassionate people I've ever met. And I want to harbor that for good. I hope that he's always that person, that he never is ashamed of his empathy and his compassion. I hope that Kai is always a person who brings joy to people's life. Kai will make you laugh till you pee your pants, and then he'll ask you some of the toughest questions on life. I don't know. He kind of reminds me of someone else I know in my life. Myself. And Asher, he is a ball of joy too, but he also knows who he is, and he isn't going to let you tell them anything different. And so I just think of those things. That's really important to me. The nature and the character of who we are, and then how oftentimes we lose that because we don't believe we belong anymore. So we try to alter that. And so self-acceptance is so, so important.
You talked about your boys, and I can't lie to you. Like, man,
No.
I just need to pause for a second, because I think about what you and I've talked about on so many episodes of the messages that we got that we're too much, too loud, too energetic, too talkative, too opinionated, whatever. And I'm not gonna lie, that is so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard to raise kids and let them be as much as they possibly want to be, loud and opinionated and all the things, because it might make other people uncomfortable. Oh, this makes me feel so deeply for Jana when she talked about wanting to assimilate. Because we live in a world that constantly tries to give us messages about our identity, about who we are, because it makes other people uncomfortable. It was never about us. Sometimes it's about how other people feel about themselves. And when we love ourselves, accept who we were created to be, and can fully walk in that, I do believe we give other people permission to do that. But I definitely can see even moments where I can project that onto my kids. Storm has arguably the loudest laugh in life. It is obnoxious sometimes. I'm not gonna lie. And we will be in public, and she will just bust out in this like weird little dolphin sounding clown laugh. I don't even know how to explain it. It's like, ha! Like, I just can't even do it. Like, I'll sound so crazy. And I'll be like, Storm, it's okay to be excited, but you don't gotta laugh that loud.
Yeah.
Dang, that just hit me.
Makes me think of that song we're taught as kids. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Don't let anyone snuff it out. It's like the world wants us to freaking dim our light. And God's like, no, you're my light. Let it shine, like who you are. Let it shine. Don't let anything dim your light. And yet, as my kids, oh God, it's gonna be a weeping.
I'm having tears right now.
As my kids get older, I watch the world, even in their elementary schools or in their preschools. I remember the day that Jude came home and had his first bout of embarrassment or shame. And I remember how I just wanted to go and just punch every single person at that school who was telling him he was a dork. That he was like, someone called me a dork today because I was like dancing on the playground, like being silly. And I was like, why were you dancing? He's like, because I was just having fun. I was just full of joy and I did something really funny and I was just dancing. And this kid said, what a dork. And he goes, Mom, I'm such a dork. And I was like, no,
because we will take the words that people speak over us for truth. Words have the power to create life, to create worlds. God
Absolutely.
spoke the world into existence.
Yeah.
Literally from his mouth, we were created.
Yeah.
And we too, created in his image and likeness, have the power with our words to speak life or death. And we
Yeah.
can kill spirits. And I
Yeah.
realize as we're having this conversation, moments where I probably have already begun to do that in my child
Yeah.
because I'm concerned with the opinions of other people. Because what does that mean about me as a parent? Or what will people think about my kid? Or will they get bullied? It might be with the best intention in mind and trying to protect them and keep them safe, but
Yeah.
killing their light, dimming their
Yeah.
light so that other
Yeah.
people can feel comfortable around them,
Yeah.
unacceptable.
We talk about this all the time. Our kids are our greatest encouragements and reflections of ourselves, because the ways that I have shrunk in my life are the same ways I watch my kids try to shrink. And when I'm telling Jude, buddy, don't shrink back. Like, I love who you are. God loves who you are. God is literally saying that same thing to me. Erin, quit shrinking back. Quit apologizing. Quit worrying that you're not that person's cup of tea. Quit worrying what that person thinks about you. I love you. I love who you are. And I've given you people who love who you are too. And keep being her, because that's what's going to change the world. And I'm speaking those words into my kids, but I'm not speaking those words over myself.
Yes. Yes. I talk about this with you, and I don't know if I've ever talked about this on the podcast, but when I left corporate America, I had a lot of undoing to do because essentially corporate America is trying to make everybody operate the same, right? So if one person's out, you could just pluck another person in. So you get these performance reviews. And my performance reviews, a lot of times, praise things that I felt like were gifts that God gave me, which I'm so thankful for. But a lot of times they also talked about how my blessings were my biggest curses and tried to continue to tailor and chip away and polish. And honestly, sometimes they were deeply personal. Sometimes they were not related to the work. Sometimes they were related to my personality. Sometimes they were related to how I am as a person. And I'm all for polishing and evolving as people, but I'm not for chipping away at somebody's character or projecting your own insecurities on somebody else because they're shining too brightly. And it took a lot of undoing for me after leaving corporate America. It's why I went on the journey of asking myself, who am I, when it's not attached to what I do and it's not attached to somebody telling me how I perform. It took a lot of undoing for me to get back. And I'm still in the process of figuring out who God created me to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And we started Come.Union because we shared that journey. We shared that journey of having an identity in something that maybe used our gifts, but didn't define who we were. And it's really hard for our identity to not be wrapped up in what we do. And I like to say organizations benefit from who God says I am, but they don't say who God says I am. They don't define who God says I am.
That's good.
And I want us to leave this community of Come.Union with something tangible to walk away from the episode of thinking about, how do we allow ourselves to be seen? And then what is the benefit? Because there has to be a benefit. We can't just say we're going to allow ourselves to be seen and then there's no benefit to it. So T, how do you think we allow ourselves to be seen?
I think first and foremost, it really does come down to understanding who we are, who God created us to be. And sometimes it is going back. I don't know who I heard say this. And if I find it, we'll link it or share it or something. But somebody was like, go back to when you were a child. What were the things that made you excited? What were the things that got you riled up? What were the things you were passionate about? What did people say about you as a kid before the world got a hold of you and then tried to tell you who you were? And I think some of it is going back to our childlike state, right? Who are we? Who were we before we started to listen to the voices that told us who we were. Who were we at our core? Who did God create us to be? What were the things that lit up our world? So I think first and foremost, it's knowing who we are. And then I think it's about who we allow and invite into our lives and whose voices we give weight to in our lives.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, words have power, and we have to find people that will accept us with our quirks, with our mess, with our baggage, with our shortcomings. I mean, all the things, our flaws, and love us despite. And it might not be tons of people. It might just be a couple. And that's okay.
Yeah. And I think about how do you find those people? Because those people are really hard to find. Like when I find safe people in my life who I can share my life with, it can't be a one-way street. I talk about pirates with John all the time. We talk about people in our life who have felt like pirates. They're the people who come into your life and all they want to do is take and take and take, but there's nothing that they want to give back. Those aren't the safe people for me in my life. That's a different relationship that I would have with that person. The people who are safe in my life are the people whom I can share the very worst about myself and believe that they're still going to love me. Not just love me like, oh, I love you, but like deeply still love me, and vice versa, that they're willing, because you and I know vulnerability breeds vulnerability. Like
1000%.
You and I are really good friends because we're really raw and honest with each other. There is a place of complete safety in my relationship with you and my friendship with you because I know that you're going to give me the real and you know I'm going to give you the real right back.
And it hurts sometimes. It does hurt, but it's not in it like a malicious hurt. It's I know I believe the best in you, and I don't want you to stay here.
That's
kind of vulnerability and honesty.
That's it, T. And I would say, how do we know who those people are the people that even if they say something hard to us, we always walk away better for it. It's knowing that the voices that speak into our life will never leave us the way they found us. They'll always leave us better. When I'm surrounded with people who don't let me forget who I am, and I surround myself with people with whom I feel I belong, even if the rest of the world is trying to tell me I don't, they're reminding me, one, what God says, and two, they're saying, no, you belong with me. I want you here. Then I get to live free. Then you get to live free. I'm the freest I've ever been when I believe in who God says I am, and I'm surrounding myself with people who are reminding me of that every day. There's a picture that sits next to my door when I leave my house. I've talked about it before. That picture is a representation of a season of my life where I was speaking, I was proclaiming the gospel to a bunch of high school and middle school students from all over the Northwest. And I was living into who God says I am. I was getting up there and I was sharing the gospel every single day from a posture of my knees because I needed to hear it just as much as anyone in the room needed to hear it. But I believed who God said I was, and I believed that he would speak through me, and I was free. But I was also surrounded with people who were reminding me that, so that the enemy's lies couldn't come in, so that what the world around me and the people around me, even the naysayers wanted to say about me, didn't faze me because I was locked in, because I was surrounded with the people who knew me, and I was listening to God's voice and his approval of me, and not alone. And that I'm not always great at that if I'm being really real, but that benefit outweighs to go into isolation, to not live life with other people. And you know this to be true, and I know this to be true, T. Once you experience true community, once you experience places of total belonging, you never go back.
Ever.
You can't.
It's hard. It's hard because for me, there's a joke, with my friends. They mess with me so much, but I hate small talk. I literally hate small talk. Like, I don't want the surface level. Even today, you were like, how are you? And my first inclination was like, good. And I was like, that's not even how I would really answer that question. Don't act funny because you're on this podcast. No, girl, you're not okay. You're figuring stuff out. Like, it's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to be real about that. But my friends joke all the time. I don't like small talk because I want to know people deeply. I want people to be seen. And I want to feel safe enough to be seen by them as well. And so, yes,
Absolutely.
like one of my friends sends me stuff on Instagram all the time. And basically, like, there's one girl, she's like in the club and the music's blaring, and she's trying to have a therapy session with her friends, asking them deep, heartfelt questions about their childhood trauma and stuff. And she's like, "This is you. This is
Hey,
you." And
that's you and me. That's you and me.
I'm like,
I will totally be in the clubs being like, and how's your heart? And they're like,
I mean, I ain't been in a club in a while, like a long time, because I feel like I'm a little too old for the club these days. But and I'm a
nah,
mama and a wife, ain't much out there for me. But if I was in the club, I probably would be sitting there having some life talks or some. But no, but
right.
for real, like I mean, like I do, I want to go deep. But I do also know, and I'm struggling right now,
Yeah.
completely transparently, with relationships where people aren't willing to go there with me.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
realize that not everybody's comfortable. And I know it takes time and it takes
Yeah.
trust,
Yeah.
but I just don't want to do surface level friendships.
Yeah.
I just don't. I don't want to do small talk. Life is so heavy and it's not meant to be lived alone. We're not meant to have
Yep.
it all figured out. And so
Yep.
my hope and my desire really is to go deep with people so that they can walk with me in my hard and my good. It doesn't have to always be hard. And I can do the
Yep.
same with them, right? Because we
Yep.
also need to feel safe enough to celebrate our wins and share the moments that people could try to rain on if they are jealous or envious or whatever. And so it's the good and the bad, but I want to walk with people that aren't fair weather friends, aren't surface level friends, but like we're middle of the ocean up to our necks, we treading
Yep.
water type
Yep.
friends. And so it's hard. Once you experience it, it's hard to ever go back to relationships that you don't have that level of depth with. But I do believe that our vulnerability, our living authentically does give other people permission to do so. And so sometimes it is us taking that first step and inviting
Yep.
people into an intimate space, a safe space where they can be vulnerable as well. And then
Mhm.
they too will foster those environments. And so unfortunately, we just got to keep being vulnerable.
Yep. And like you said, it really does take time. And it's not always about us. It's not always about you. When someone seemingly rejects your vulnerability, it's not always the fact that they don't want to go deep with you because of you. It may be because their trust has been eroded by other people in their life. And the greatest way that we can walk alongside people and show them vulnerability is not only living vulnerable lives ourselves and being honest with them, but keeping their name, allowing their name to be safe in our mouth. Like that's such a big one for me is when I'm with a person and all they do is talk bad about other people, that's going to send off a red flag in me that that person is not a safe person or that's not a person that can be trusted. But if I'm with a person and I'm spending time with them and they're just honest and real with me and all I hear that comes out of their mouth is not gossip about another person, but it's just words of life,
Yep.
notice those people because
Yep.
those are probably the safest people with whom we can share the truth of ourselves with. And I don't want to always spiritualize it, but God does make that pretty clear. When we're creating these gatherings, because communion is supposed to be more than just this podcast. So we're testing out these gatherings, these communities. That's what this was founded on. We're inviting people into really vulnerable spaces. And that takes a lot of courage for people to want to step into those places and to share what's hard because they may not even know each other. And they're having to blindly trust that what they say is going to be safe in that room and not leave that room. And so I do think it takes time. I want to encourage this community that it does take time and it takes a whole lot of courage. But I will say this, that if you're willing to enter spaces and be truly who you are, because you believe that who God says you are is enough, it will not return void. And I really do believe that I can't think of a single time. I mean, TT, you and I are dear friends because we entered into a room as strangers, not knowing each other, blindly began to trust one another because we had said yes to the same thing. We had said yes to doing life together in what used to be supper club, now is communion. And it changed our life forever. And the people that we did it with changed our life forever. We are forever bonded to those people because we chose to trust each other. And it took time and it was messy, but it was worth it. And I'm forever grateful for it.
Me too, girl. Me too. And now we get to do this together.
Yeah.
And it's been a joy. Woo, we could keep going. We could talk about this forever because it's something that's super near and dear to our hearts. But we'll leave you here and just say thank you. Thank you for tuning in. I pray that you have the courage to be vulnerable this week. I pray that you would find somebody that is safe enough, that allows you to be seen and known, and that you will come out of hiding this week if you feel like you've been there. I pray that you would step into the light that you were always meant to shine in and be known, be seen. It's okay.
No,
it's okay.
Amen, friend.
You are enough.
That's so good. So good.
Well, on that note, we can end it here. Go follow us.
Okay.
Subscribe, like it, all the things, leave a review, and we'll let the reconciliation begin.
Thanks so much for listening today. Want to stay up to date with our episodes? Then subscribe to our podcast and newsletter on our website, Come.Union.com. Follow us on Instagram at Come.Union. Rather watch our podcast? Then subscribe to our YouTube channel at Come_Union. We are so glad you're a part of this community.